Sorry. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of Portsmouth City Council's Cabinet. I'm Councillor Steve Pitt. I'm the leader of the council, and I'll be chairing this meeting. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble at Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. And please do be aware that it is graduation today and life will likely be very busy out there. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. Everyone speaking via a microphone will be recorded and broadcast on the website, including any making deputations. I think we've only got one today. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they're finished. We all have read the reports, so officers are here to do a highlight summary and report on any developments that have occurred since the publication. We'll now do introductions, starting with the officers present, please. David.
David Williams, Chief Executive.
Chris Ward, Director of Finance.
Anna Martin, Democratic Services.
Councillor Hugh Mason.
Susie Horton, Cabinet Member for Children, Families and Education.
Councillor Darren Sanders, Cabinet Member for Housing and Tackling Homelessness.
Councillor Leon, Cabinet Member for Resources.
Dave Ashmore, one of the councillors for Fratton.
Councillor Kimberly Barrett, Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Greening the City.
Councillor Graham Heaney, Labour Councillor for St Jude Ward, giving a deputation to the meeting.
Steve Bell, Regulatory Services Lead.
Colette Hill, Assistant Director Neighbourhoods.
Rebecca Adams, Project Manager for Waste Management.
Ian Fitchett, Electoral Services Manager.
Kelly Nash from the Strategy Unit.
Councillor George Madrick of the Paulsgrove Ward.
Helen Dickerson, Deputy Monitoring Officer.
Welcome all. We have apologies today from Councillor Ian Holder, who's on leave. I believe it's possible that Councillor Vernon Jackson may make it back later in the meeting, but is currently taking his partner to hospital. Declarations of interest, members. Are there any? Councillor Sanders, please.
I have a prejudicial interest in the final item on the agenda, which is mandatory licensing of houses in multiple occupation, as I live in one of the properties that are affected, so I will be leaving early.
Understood. Just heard the door go. Please join us, Gerald. You've made it back. Have you got any declarations, Gerald?
No.
Okay.
Thank you. My apologies for being late.
Minutes of the previous meeting, 22nd of June. Are we happy with those, members? Yes, we are. Councillor Winnington has also joined the meeting. Councillor Winnington, do you have any declarations?
No.
No. Just for the members of the public watching, it's very, very busy downstairs, so we've all had to battle through to get in today. There is one deputation, I understand, today from Councillor Graham Heaney relating to item 6 on the agenda, bathing water quality. Councillor Heaney, would you like to do your deputation at the start of the meeting or wait and do it before item 6?
I'll wait and do it before item 6.
That's fine by me. Thank you very much. In that case, we're now on to item 4, which is appointment to an outside organisation, and that's Portsmouth Naval Base Property Trust. All members have been canvassed, and Councillor, for clarity, that means all members of the council have been canvassed, and Councillor Russell Simpson has expressed an interest, and we're here today to decide whether the Cabinet agrees with this appointment. It's not a prejudicial interest, but I am currently a trustee of that organisation, so I will not vote on this. But I don't think that conflicts me with managing the process, unless legal think otherwise. No, they don't. That's fine. I would say that whilst it's not recorded here on the order paper, the process that we go to with some organisations in the city who do canvass for professional skills is that whilst the Cabinet will make a recommendation today, there will then be an interview from the Chair of Trustees and probably the Chief Executive of the organisation to see whether the skill set on offer from the nominated member is appropriate for the organisation. and that's a very level playing field because I went through the same process when I was appointed. Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. And I think when we've done this before, we've done for a couple of organisations, we've asked for them to do the interview before the appointment. I'm just slightly worried doing it this way round forces an organisation into a corner, and what we've looked for in the past is a recommendation from them of who they think would be served best on their committee. Should we not keep it consistent with what we've done before and do the interview before we come to do the appointment as opposed to the other way around?
That's, yeah, okay, maybe I wasn't 100% clear enough. What I'm saying is that we will have no objection to the appointment, but it would be subject to. The differences with this particular organisation, as you'll be aware, Gerald, that the posts are remunerated, and they have, I know because I'm a member of the trust, that they've recently gone through a skills audit for trustees, and therefore they're particularly keen on making sure that the skills match from anyone that comes on meets that audit process and is not just a placeholder.
Which,
as is their legal duty with the Charity Commission.
No, I think they're completely right. I don't have a problem with that. I just think in some ways, by us making the decision now before they've done the interview, we almost second guess what they're going to come up with. And I kind of wonder whether, I don't have any objection to Russell doing it at all, whether we should defer this until after they've done their interview and then make the decision based upon that, not put the cart before the horse.
I'm very relaxed about it either way. Members, what do you think?
Be advised by the legal officer, I guess.
Well, don't really need legal advice, do we? No. It's within our gift. Councillor Mason.
It's quite common in business and other professions these days to offer a post subject to interview on subject to references. This is quite common, so I'd not be unhappy to do it today.
Councillor Madgwick, as his group leader, has he expressed any preference to you?
No, but being Russell Simpson the way he is, he's always keen and eager to get this started. So, you know, I'm sure he would like the process started as quick as possible. But I completely understand if you want to defer it. But I do agree with Councillor Mason that even with our chief executive role, it's offered upon the reflection of interviews and references and so on and so forth. So I think, you know, I agree with Councillor Mason that this isn't binding, is it? It's just, yeah. So.
Councillor Hall.
I guess it's one of those ways that you can cut it two ways, can't you? But I'm just picking up on Gerald's point, is if the precedent is that actually we don't influence it by recommending someone, that the interview's done first and then we do it. I don't think that makes any difference to the timeline. So I think I'm on balance probably minded to agree with Gerald in the sense that the timeline can happen, the interview can happen, and then it's ratified almost by us, rather than us influencing by recommend. It looks like maybe we're recommending someone.
Yeah, I think where I am in terms of process, the Cabinet approves nominations too. So if we were to go to the Property Trust and give them the opportunity to express their view, and there being no other nominations, it's then problematic, not on this occasion, almost certainly, but potentially on a future occasion, for the Cabinet to then take a different view than that offered by the organisation, perhaps at some future occasion, with very good reason. David?
Yeah, I mean, if you wished, you could change the recommendation so that you're saying that the councillor is supported in his application for member, because you're not making the decision, the trustees are making the decision. That at least leaves it open.
And just for transparency, I won't be part of the other end of the process either. So are you happy with that amendment? Yes? Dave?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if the recommendation says something along the lines of recommend Councillor Russell Simpson to be put forward, yeah, then I'm happy to go with that.
Yeah, everyone happy? Yeah. Good, okay. Duly noted. Thank you very much. Item 5, this is a review of the 2023 local elections. partly in light of the requirements around ID at polling stations this year, and it's Ian Fitchett to present.
Thank you. Yes, hopefully the report provides a useful summary and some statistics. I think the sort of key things we can take away from it. Turnout was slightly down, 29.5% compared to 31.1% last year. Voter ID requirements themselves, not too many issues arising on polling day, although it would have to be said, of course, the key statistic here would be the 99 people who did go to the polling station and were recorded without ID, who then didn't subsequently return. So that's 99 people that didn't vote due to the new requirements. So it's significant, I think, although in line with the sort of national picture. We don't have full details nationally as yet. The Electoral Commission are working on their report and their analysis. We expect that later in the autumn. It seems, though, from what we do know, and from talking to colleagues in other authorities, we're right in the sort of ballpark of where they were also. I mean, that's basically where we are with it. Happy to take any sort of questions on any of that.
Thank you very much, Ian. Of course, what we don't know is how many people didn't apply for ID and therefore didn't vote, and it's not the same people that vote every year, so it's quite difficult being able to quantify those numbers, isn't it? I've had concerns about this from the get-go, but I'm interested to hear from colleagues. Councillor Sanders.
Thanks, Steve. I mean, I can also say that having spoken to people before the election, there were people who didn't want to go to the polling station because they didn't think they had the right ID. And they were mainly senior citizens, which I don't think was the intention of whatever Jacob Rees-Mogg said about it. But I think that the first point is it doesn't include a whole raft of people who just didn't go anyway. A couple of points, Ian. The first is around next year. So this year the requirements for postal voting were unchanged. What is going to be different next year, because it will be changed?
Okay, so there's several changes that are coming in future years relating to postal votes. There will be some rules in place at next May's elections to do with anyone handing in postal votes at a polling station. I don't think that they're going to be a big issue for us in Portsmouth, because the numbers are pretty low of people doing that. On average, we're looking at perhaps half a dozen postal votes returned to each polling station. So pretty low numbers. Unlikely to be a big factor, I think, here. So the rules will be that there will be a restriction on the number that somebody can hand in, and I think that's going to be 6, including their own. So not likely to be a factor for us here. Online, ability to apply for a postal vote online will be in place from the end of the year, from 31st of October, we're hearing. That won't affect any existing postal voters, obviously it's making it more accessible. There will be changes coming up in the future in terms of the period that a postal vote will be valid for. So they'll be valid for 3 years. None of these changes will be effective for the polls next year. These will be phased in from the end of 2025. So I think everyone who's a current postal voter will need to have reapplied by January 2026. So we've got a couple of years to get to grips with how that's going to work. But anyone applying in the shorter term, it will be restricted to 3 years.
Thanks, Ian. Go on, Darren.
Sorry, just one more question. In paragraph 8.4, you say that you've used £25,444 of the funding that's available. How much extra cash did we spend on this bit of the elections, on doing this work? Was it £25,444, or was it more?
All of the additional costs are within that, yes.
Okay. Those are all my questions, Stephen.
Okay, Councillor Winnington.
Thank you. No questions, and thank you, Ian, for your reports and your answers to Councillor Sanders' questions. More of a comment and expanding a bit more on what Councillor Pitt said. So 99 people, as was mentioned in the report, didn't vote. That's 99 times too many. If anyone is eligible to vote, they should be able to vote. If they're stopped from voting, that is, ladies and gentlemen, voter suppression. That is what this is about. It is about nothing else. It is about voter suppression. Now, as already been mentioned, it would appear that some of the people who were suppressed from voting were not the people that Jacob Rees-Mogg was alluding to in terms of it was about voter suppression, as he admitted himself recently. Because as we know, as has been mentioned, a lot of those were older people. Now, older people disproportionately vote Conservative, and, well, that's a shame, isn't it, in terms of you're hung by your own petard. But the point is, I'm not happy about that, because 99 people in our city didn't vote when they didn't have the right ID. But more to the point, we know, anecdotally, because I think all of us in the Cabinet have been out and spoke to people on the doorsteps who said, I'm not going to vote because I haven't got the ID to vote. But I would have voted otherwise. It's not good enough, is it? It just is not good enough. If someone has the right to vote, they should be able to vote. It's that simple. So, this is an indictment. It's an indictment of government policy. It's an indictment on what has happened over the last 8 years. It is an indictment of this government who is more interested in petty political games rather than governing this country properly. And this is the most egregious example of suppressing people from acting in the democratic fashion. So it is a good paper, but it is a paper that has parts of it that are extremely depressing, and I am sad, and I'm not going to apologise, but I'm going to ask the government to apologise to every single person in the city who could not have their democratic right to vote that they were entirely eligible to do through their policy changes.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt, please.
Well, in more or less the same vein, I mean, it's a hammer to crack a nut and a complete waste of money. I mean, it's £80,000 of something that the government spent here, what to stop something like, maybe, depends, 90 odd people from voting actually on the day, but maybe 2,299 people decided they weren't going to vote. And all of us, Graham included, and George, all of us here have been banging on doors during the election, had people on the doorsteps, some that I spoke to who had all the necessary ID, just said they weren't going to not vote as a protest against the actual policy, the law rather, this new law that the Conservatives have brought in. It just wasn't necessary. There was little or no personation before. It's just a hammer to crack a nut. I mean, it doesn't add up, does it? Doesn't make any, the actual turnout hasn't changed all that much. So the outcomes of the elections, as some of us feared, weren't that affected. Not that we know about anyway. Maybe here and there it happened. But, quite frankly, the criminal aspect of this is the sheer waste of public money. 62 stewards had to be employed on the day or something. I'm thinking about £100 a day. So that's about £6,200. And we could all spend that money, £6,200, in a much more constructive way. I'm sure the stewards had a lovely time talking to people, and we all do on the polling stations. But yes, together with the £80,000 there, and it's not going to be the end of it, is it? You multiply that across the country, the money could have honestly been spent in a much better way.
Councillor Vernon Jackson.
I agree with everything that people have said here. The law was clearly designed to discourage people who were not going to vote Conservative from coming out to vote, and it probably wasn't aimed at the local elections because the government probably don't care about those, but it's aimed at the general election where they're trying everything possible to hold on. The bit that I got feedback from was that people who worked in the dockyard, who are trusted to work on things that are confidential and security based and for which they have to have security clearance, were not allowed to use their dockyard pass to be able to vote. So a pass that says, I have had security clearance. I'm okay to work with UK secrets. It's not okay to go and vote. I think that's absolutely ridiculous, and I hope that I think we should ask the leader of the council to write to the government. I know, Steve. You complain you don't write enough letters, and I'm sure we'll all work hard to make sure that you are writing more. But I think we have a different problem here. Here, Plymouth, and probably is this a Scottish law? Does this work in Scotland as well? So up in Rosyth, we will have particular issues which are not the same as other places. And I think it would be sensible to bring that to the attention of the government, because it is ludicrous that you can be okay to have a pass to work in the dockyard and pass security clearances, but nobody trusts you to be able to go and vote.
Yeah, and leader, sorry, following up, somebody should speak up for the students and that bus pass lark there, you know. OAPs could use their bus pass, but students couldn't. I wonder why.
Okay, I get that everyone's animated on this one, so am I, just less expressively so on this occasion. Councillor Vernon Jackson, who you weren't 100% clear who would like me to write to?
Oh, I'd have thought the Prime Minister, the guy who's at least theoretically in charge.
For the time being.
Okay, I'm happy to write to the Prime Minister. Will colleagues like me to write to the Prime Minister?
Can I suggest you don't do it by name on the basis then they may change?
Yes, so I'll just write to whoever is the Prime Minister on this day. Yes, that's fine, thank you. I'm going to offer, since we've got members of the other groups with us today, and this is about something that affects all of us equally, I'll offer you both the opportunity to come in if you want to, because I think it's something where there'll be an outbreak of agreement. But I mean, my thoughts on it are they already sent everyone a poll card every year that you didn't need to take to the polling station. The easiest thing to do if you want to change behaviours was just to say everybody to take your polling card to the polling station and forget about everything else. And instead of that, they changed it into a full-size letter and posted it out to everybody. The whole thing's a nonsense. But yes, designed for voter suppression, I agree. Councillor Madgwick, did you want to come in on this one?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Leader. I've got two quick questions for Ian before making just a comment. First question being only raised from what Councillor Hunt said. When I was speaking to somebody on the day, I thought it was a lot more than £100. So just confirmation, I thought it was nearer the 200s.
The cost for the stewards was, I forget exactly. I think we were looking at 170 to 180 in that region.
Which is
it should
even
it
more,
should actually be noted though. Some of the stewards would have been in situation anyway, so it wasn't that full amount of extra. A number of the busier stations we would have them anyway. But yeah, certainly a number that we certainly wouldn't have considered otherwise than for voter ID.
And just my second quick question before I make a comment. Can you just confirm for me quickly, just so I definitely have the understanding right of what the role was of the stewards on the day? What was the actual role of what were they employed to do? I'm pretty sure I know, but just for clarification.
So the role would depend on the particular station. So as I alluded to just then, we've since COVID been we've rebranded some of our poll clerks as stewards. We've always had certain stations where the higher electorate or higher turnout, where we've had 3 poll clerks, but there isn't always a sensible way of breaking down the role between 3. So we've often had a third poll clerk doing a kind of steward role. So we've kind of formalised that into a steward role. Their role would be at a combined station to help voters to go to the correct part of the station. So we've got 2 or 3 polling stations in the same building. They would do that. But their main role this time, universally across all the stations, would be to welcome voters and to remind them about the voter ID requirement.
Perfect.
It was a reminder.
Yeah, so the only comment, the only comments I want to make, Leader, is exactly that. Obviously, the point of the jobs, or one of the points of their jobs, was to remind people about ID. And when I was looking at the table, point 6.1 states it does not include anyone who arrived at the polling station but did not enter after being reminded by the stewards about the new requirements. So the figures we've got of 200 odd people turned away does not include anybody at all that was turned away by the stewards. Now, I'm not sure about other councillors in this room here, but I spoke to a lot of people on the day and stood at poll stations across Hillsey, Copner and Paulsgrove on the day. And what alarms me when I saw this report is under 6.3, the table that shows the turners away, as Paulsgrove says that 4 people turned away, which is the lowest out of the city, which I think we can all appreciate for an area that's comparable to like Charles Dickens, where there was a high turn away for postal votes. That seems really low. And my experience in Paulsgrove is I personally, with my own physical eyes, saw 9 people being turned away. So the 4 that's on the statement is not an accurate reflection of the true figures. And by true figures, I mean the people that were turned away by stewards because they were reminded. So it's, you know, just reflecting on what Councillor Hunt said as well, is that, you know, the 223 is probably a very, very small fraction of the people that actually were turned away on the day in relation to the stewards. So I think we can multiply that number by a significant amount. And I don't know whether going forward, and I'm not sure, Ian, whether this is a mandatory thing that is set by government or where it's localised, is whether stewards next year could record the amount of people they turn away as well, just for our information, because they're there anyway, so a little clipboard with that information would be good. And the very, very final quick point I want to say is I didn't actually realise until I read this, but I just want to commend how well Councillor Strudwick did in Hilsey, in an area where, in a city where 13 wards had a reduction, to get the only plus was quite commendable. I know she did a lot of work, but I didn't realise she did that much. But
Councillor Madrick, I'm going to stop you there. Councillor Heaney, would you like to make any comment on this? You don't have to, but if you'd like to.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to do that. You didn't need to do that, but I will just make a couple of comments, really. I mean, one is that I suspect this issue and the data will provide a lot of information and opportunities for political scientists to explore the impact on electoral behaviour for some years to come, particularly when we start comparing elections. But the other thing I'd say is that one of the interesting things about the alleged reason for bringing this in was to prevent voter fraud. If you compare the number of people who've been prevented from voting on the basis of this, the number of people who have actually been prosecuted for voter fraud, the figures are quite disproportionate. It seems we have used a sledgehammer to crack a nut, and it's had a detrimental impact, and unfortunately that is the case. I mean, the other thing I would say is that I have 2 forms of photo ID, which are authorised by my employer and by the City Council, and I can't for the life of me see why I can't use these, because the photo on this bears a reasonable resemblance to me, and I would have had great difficulty in forging this. So again, a wider form of ID would be really, really helpful if you think that it is very important that people should be able to be identified by a photo ID system.
Thank you, and thank you, members. So are we agreed the report's noted? Thank you very much. Item 6, bathing water quality. Graham, would you like to give your deputation?
I thought the normal practice was the officer to introduce the reports.
It is, but I'm not bound by normal practice.
Because he might answer some of the points I'm going to make, or maybe make my slide, so that it might shorten my deputation, which we'll be very glad about, I'm sure.
That's fine. Over to you then, Steve.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity for me to present the paper for you this afternoon on bathing water quality. As requested, I will give a summary of the basic points of the report. The purpose of the report is the best way to inform the public on water quality for users of designated bathing waters. When we say bathing waters, that is a term coined by the Environment Agency, who are the enforcement agency, and it's perhaps an antiquated term, but it does actually mean obviously our waters, which are not only used for bathing, but for various other aspects by visitors to the city as well as residents. The recommendations are to locate digital terminals on the seafront to display information on water quality linked to Southern Water's Beach Boy app on storm release activity, and to work with partners to monitor and protect the quality of our seawater. As by background, obviously Portsmouth is known as the Great Waterfront City for its coastal waters and blue spaces, and city residents and visitors use our waters for a number of activities all year round. Portsmouth has 2 formally designated bathing beaches, Eastney and Southsea East. These are assessed by the regulator, the enforcement agency, and these beaches are designated by sampling at a specific point where they base their whole results on. They monitor and take these samples from May to October each year and grade the beaches based on these results. And results can range from excellent down to a prohibition or poor. Over the last 4 years, the water quality at Southsea East has declined. The latest 2022 rating is designated as sufficient. Eastney, by comparison, is consistently rated as excellent. The Council displays signage to make the public aware of these classifications, and Regulatory Services has been assisting the Environment Agency by also taking water quality samples at these locations, including Southsea East. Results indicate that there is a concern that there is a deterioration at Southsea East over the last couple of years. If this continues, there is a possibility that the classification could drop to poor. This would mean advising the public of this, which could have impacts on residents and visitors wishing to use our waters, as well as reputational concerns for the city. We've undertaken a survey with the public on how they use our waters and how we could improve our communication results. Our communication results are in Appendix 1. Just to summarise those, 92% of respondents are concerned about our water quality, but the majority feel positive that the council are informing them about the storm releases into the Solent. However, 57% of the respondents expressed a wish that the council could do more. Stakeholders are working together on this issue, including Havant Borough Council, Langston Harbour Board, the Environment Agency, Southern Water, the Coastal Defence Team and local businesses. We have formed a working group. Work is ongoing to find causes of the problem, such as broken or damaged sewer systems, and repairs are being made as they are found. It's too early to predict long-term impacts of investigations and mitigation. However, the most recent test results are encouraging with respect to the water quality at Southsea East. It is improving. The Environment Agency is working with water companies to ensure that water discharges are monitored and are reporting back on this activity. The government's Storm Overflow Discharge Reduction Plan has set new targets for water companies. Plan states that by 2035, water companies need to improve on overflow discharges by 75%, and by 2050, no overflows at all will be permitted. However, this basically informs the need that our water users will need to be informed of the quality of the water will remain for some time. The provision of public information terminals work is ongoing. We are engaging with Southern Water and it's been positive so far in exploring how to achieve this. It's hoped that an agreement will shortly be reached on how best to move forward with the provision of public information. And updates since the report is written. Currently the results are still positive. There is a low bacteria, but just as a caveat to that, it may take time for these results to filter through for the Environment Agency to change the classification, but there is a hope that it won't drop any lower than sufficient. The Southern Water work is ongoing and they're doing lots of investigation work and they are still fixing problems that are found. But I say it's too early to decide whether the remedial work that they've done already is going to solve the problem. But at least it is encouraging. We are in discussion with Southern Water on forms of signage, and Havant Borough Council are in agreement with our proposed signage on what we should have to display, obviously if there is a worst case scenario, and that's ongoing. That concludes my brief synopsis of the paper, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Steve, and huge thanks to you and to Richard Lee for all the work you've been doing on this and leading collaborations with other partners around the area. I know it's been a big collaborative effort and it's been really welcome. I'd like to place on record thanks to Havant Council for their support on this and for working with us, not just on this issue, but other issues related to Southern Water around Havant Thicket as well, where we're making sure that we remain on the same page as our nearest local authority neighbours. Members, any comments or questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Heaney, deputation. So you should have gone first, shouldn't you?
No, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for giving the opportunity to make a deputation. The first thing I'd like to say is I have no problem with the recommendations on the report. I think it's really important that we inform people about the quality of water so they can make a decision about whether it's safe for them to swim. As you all know, I'm representing St Jude Ward. Of course, the beach is part of my ward. My ward colleague, Councillor Smythe, is also water, but she's also a regular swimmer, a winter time and summertime swimmer, so she has a particular interest in this. I confess I am a non-swimmer, so it doesn't really affect me directly. But what I wanted to say really was in relation to the way in which this has happened. There'll be some questions that will come out of my deputation as well, which I hope you might be able to answer, and I'll try and make them as clear and as concise as possible. The Environment Agency sent out information at the end of November to members of Parliament about the water quality, and Steve Morgan sent copies to Labour Group members, and I obviously received mine in a couple of days into December. And the report basically showed, it says the 2022 bathing water classification for the waters in York and Virginia are, And they went from 219 to 221 to 19, 21 and 22. For East and East, all three were excellent. For South Sea East, it was excellent in 219, good in 221 and sufficient in 222. So there was clearly a trend of falling quality. I therefore wrote to Richard Lee asking if he had any ideas about what was causing that gradual declining trend, given that the East and East is not that far away. He wrote a very comprehensive answer back, which I won't read, but he basically identified 4 issues which he thought might be of relevance. One was the impact of combined sewer outflows, but I think he concluded that probably wasn't the main cause because of the way in where the sewer outflows are and the flows of water. The impact of damaged foul connections under South Sea Parade, he says South Sea Parade Pier, South Parade Pier, which was one, and which he said there were still ongoing discussions about, and that's a question I want to ask. Have we had any further information about whether that is one of the issues or not, if we can say anything in this meeting? The other one was about the impact of foul waste entering the Great Morass and contaminants leaching out under the beach. And the fourth one was other impacts like the coastal defence works. I think he thought that probably 2 and 3 were possibles and 4 was not seen as one of the major factors. So what I wanted to ask in relation to the report is, on the appendix, Appendix 2, it has 2 tables showing the collection point B east of Pier and the west of Pier. Sorry, collection point A west of Pier and collection point B east of Pier. There is one peak around about the 19th, 20th of June for both east and west, which suggests that something happened at that time that caused an increase in the pollutants. The one on the east pier, which obviously is the official EA one, says there was high levels on the 23rd of May, but doesn't show anything on the 23rd of May west of the pier. So that's interesting, you know. And this is, I think, what makes it quite difficult to find out what the answers are. But I wondered if there's any indications to what might have caused the double peak, both east and west of the pier. Reading the section 5, I understand that it's not easy, but I would like to know a bit more about what actually has been done to try and identify this, because we have been like 6-7 months on since I wrote my original letter and had the reply from Richard, and it doesn't appear, and I may be missing a lot of lots going behind the scenes, but it doesn't appear from the report that a huge amount of progress has been made, and I wonder if you could tell me whether there has been much progress. So my 3 questions are: South Parade Pier, is a problem? 2, the 2 tables, how do we correlate those? Can we identify an item there? And 3 is, have we made more progress than maybe is apparent from the report? So that's my deputation. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve?
Thank you, Councillor Heaney. I'll try and answer as best I can with the information I have before me. It's very difficult to specifically identify with matters like this, to actually point to a smoking gun. It's unfortunately, it's a very difficult matter to say, because I'm worried about leading the cabinet one way to say yes, it's definitely this, when it could be a number of factors. Certainly, with your question regarding the pier, a lot of investigatory work has been done in around the area with local businesses, and we've certainly investigated the pier, Southern Water investigated the pier as well as other businesses, and they found, bear in mind it's a Victorian plumbing system, they found piping which is cracked and blistering, which has been repaired. Obviously, it's been repaired over several years, where they've had to they've replaced piping with different types of piping which is not welded together, and as this has been found, this has been repaired. And again, just to give you, that was the first question about the pier. The second one, the peak, again, I have no information as to what could have caused a peak on that particular date. Other than, there are lots of factors such as the tide, sort of UV light. There are lots of different issues, but I'm afraid I don't have an answer on that, and I can certainly look into that and report back if there's any sort of, if we have any information on that. And finally, just an update. I do have a bit more information here that I can share with you. that there's been investigational monitoring at Southsea. The results have generally been low. The groundwater leachate surveys have been completed using a Fluidon instrument, and the groundwater survey of the 18th of May showed extremely elevated E. coli results around the pier. Historic surveys had found a lateral connected to the southern low near the northwest of the pier that was found to be damaged, and the southern low has been leaking into the lateral, and there's a disused toilet block that would have discharged into that lateral. And Southern Water have carried out an inspection of the redundant toilets, western side of the pier, on the 21st of June. There are 2 drain lines on the west side of the pier, one from the old toilet block and another internal inspection chamber in line which was blocked and found to be sort of full of, I think, dairy products which may have come from a business, but that has all been cleared and repaired. And again, obviously I'm reading from Richard's report, it's too early to say whether this has solved the situation, but obviously the more faults that are found and repaired, hopefully that can only lead to a positive result. And that's currently where we are, but ongoing inspection and repair is happening as we speak, and we are hopefully due to get another update when we next meet with Southern Water. Sorry, was there a third part of the question? Was that everything?
Those were the 3 main questions, actually, although I have thought of a 4th one. Sorry. We talked about the issue of when the beach, almost a threat that the beach might be closed. I mean, what is the threshold? Because I think there was a lot of concern. I had people saying, "Are they going to close the beach?" I said, "No, I don't think so." What is the threshold for that? Because I'm looking at what you're saying, and it doesn't look like what we've currently seen would meet a threshold, but I don't know what it is, and I'm not sure the public does. So I think we need to be clear about that.
Again, this is dictated by the Environment Agency on their testing, and it's all about the sort of percentage of E. coli found per 100 millilitres of water. And obviously, if it meets their threshold, I think the details are given in the legislation. If they deem to lower the sort of rating to turn it to poor and a prohibition, then that's where I believe that we would require to notify the public about the signage. I don't think we can physically prevent people from entering the water. I think that would be unenforceable. But obviously, we would be required to give advice to say not to enter. But I do repeat that the results that we are currently getting are promising, and the quality is improving. So I'm hopeful that will not it won't come to that. But I'm afraid I can issue no guarantee at this stage.
Thanks, Steve. Just by way of clarification, the way it works is it's taken over a multiple year average. So as the good stuff, the excellent that it did have, drops away and we move into a different period, it lowers down, the average drops overall. So if we were to get to a point where the historic positive results have fallen away and we remain at a satisfactory, our risk of therefore dipping into poor increases. Does that make sense? It's one of those odd things over time.
Yeah, that does make sense, but it wasn't clearly visible from the report. I think that does make a lot of sense, so that's a very helpful explanation. Thank you for that.
Yeah, cool. And I think the thing to stress on this is we are cooperating with the Environment Agency. We aren't leading this. It's not our remit to do it. The EA are in charge. They are directing Southern Water. We are helping wherever we can. If it's relationships with business owners or just being physical assistants, that's what our role in this is. We are obviously hopeful that we will not see a designation that prevents or recommends very strongly against people going into the sea. The most important thing, and the reason we wanted a report to come now, is to make people aware of what's going on and play this out in the public domain. It's too important an issue to, just sit on it until such time as we know. It's actually quite unusual for a council in some ways, but we're bringing a report while we still don't know, in the interest of the public knowing what's going on. And as Steve said, the reports are changing all the time and they are becoming more positive, so it's possible that a combination of all these little incremental fixes that have gone on all around the place has been a good housekeeping exercise that collectively may have identified something, or it could be any one of them, and we may not know. I do know, Steve, that they've been using dye testing, and they did that around the more obvious sources early on, where they put a coloured dye down and see where it comes out. And that was mainly to do with the possible leachate through the morass or any storm drain leaks that were further back than the discharge point, so along the route. So all that was done, and that all came back, and that's when they started digging into, well, then it must be something else that's less obvious. So that's why the process has taken a number of months to get to this point. So hopefully that's a bit of clarity. I know, because Richard likes nothing better than spend a great deal of time explaining all this to me in great detail, and he's on holiday at the moment. But thank you to Steve for covering all that off so ably, and Graham, hopefully that's answered some of those points that you had. Members, any questions? Councillor Hunt.
Yes, Steve, thanks. Yeah, I mean, the leader very kindly reminded us that the Environment Agency is the enforcement authority on this matter. The City Council, it has some regulatory powers, but do we go and see the owners of the pier? Because the loos are on there. When I was sat in the leader's chair, culture, like 6-7 years ago, they were hanging around like a bad smell back then. So it seems that they still are right now, but it's encouraging what you say about things being fixed. So I'm just wondering, do we get involved with the pier? Do we go talk to them about how the activities in or around the pier might impact the E. coli in that vicinity? And I completely agree with you about the tides moving back and forwards, east-west along there. Completely dynamic tide along there, which moves things about quite a lot. So, you know, will you confirm the Environment Agency are the lead authority on this, and they would cooperate with them? And then I'm wondering about how we're working with the pier to influence them to fix any structures that they've got there that might be leaking.
Yeah, absolutely. The Environment Agency are leading the process, but I can only report our engagement with local business, including the pier, has been very positive. I think everybody is in agreement that that polluted waters are no good for anybody. So so far our engagement has been positive, and anything that has been pointed out has been remedied. And Southern Water are undertaking repairs that aren't necessarily their responsibility. So I can only report back positively on the work that's been done so far.
And I think it's true to say, Steve, that there are now weekly inspections under the pier by the piers team, supported by the other agencies, to try and make sure that there are no ongoing identified issues at all, given the complex system that they started with a couple of years ago.
That's correct, Leader, yes.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mason.
Comment and then question. First comment is I am relieved as a local councillor for that area to see that there is no deterioration, indeed there is some improvement. But like Councillor Heaney, I was fascinated by Appendix 2, the difference in the peaks. There really is very little similarity between the results in time which we have received from east and west of the pier. And this leads me to the assumption that the causes are complex, that the pattern and the causes east of the pier and the causes west of the pier are different, and there may be more than one cause in both cases, and they may be very different. In this context, I would like to ask whether the information which we have received from the monitoring has been correlated with other information, such as rainfall, tidal flow, work on the sea defences, and other things which may well have influenced the level of pollution.
Yes, I think that what we've been looking at, it's obviously we do monitor with the tidal flows, and obviously rainfall does seem to be an issue, that there does seem to be a correlation between heavy rainfall and peaks. And I must admit, I haven't checked on that particular day in question, but I would suspect that could possibly be a reason as to why that peak has manifested itself. And with regard to the coastal work, the investigations that have been undertaken so far, that the evidence doesn't point that the coastal work is a cause of the problem.
Thank you, Steve. And actually, just worth noting that ongoing testing that we're doing, I know it's being absorbed as part of BAU by the regulatory service team, and that's hugely appreciated because that's all adding to the evidence base that we have, and it's also put a bit of pressure on our neighbours to also start doing more regular testing, and it's bringing that conversation with Southern Water together in more of a focus. So there's a lot of work going on here, but it's bringing clarity around some things that we really need to have clarity on. So I've got Lee, you already spoke, so I'm going to go to Matthew first.
Thank you, Steve. And thanks again for this report. It's really encouraging that that things are now happening. And I particularly like to thank Councillor Steve Pitt for the galvanising force behind getting these panels being put up. It was work that Steve has done in last year in terms of getting those things up to start telling the public about what the seawater condition is around this city, which because we know that Southern Water's alerts, etc., just weren't up to standard, and often they weren't doing things certainly not in a timely fashion. Just a first question, just to Steve, and then I've got a comment. Just for the purposes of people who might be watching at home, and indeed for the rest of the room, what is the boundary between Southsea East and Eastney?
Yeah, this is a difficult one to quantify. I wouldn't say there's a boundary. Unfortunately, the way the Environment Agency look at it, they have a specific point where they take a sample and they define that as the area. So there isn't a boundary per se. It's just a sampling point which they obtain their sample and then they classify that whole area.
Thanks. I think that's really useful to know because obviously Southsea East and Eastney are effectively next to each other, and my ward covers both of those frontages, and I think it's interesting, isn't it, how it shows how not very far apart, if you're having two sampling points, and you can have one is excellent and one is really struggling in terms of water quality. So my comment really is about this is the fact that this is happening at all is very concerning, but it's concerning for various reasons. We've talked a lot about bathing quality and about people being able to go into the sea, but of course this all fits in as well with this wider issue with water companies, and of course Southern Water, and not just the issues that we've got on our seafronts here in Southsea, but also when we're talking about water quality around the rest of our Solent area. I'm the council's representative on the Southern Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority, and our area is full of Ramsar sites, triple SIs and marine protected areas. And so you can see from our environmental point of view that any issues with water quality, they do have a human impact, but of course they have a marine life impact as well, which includes fisheries. And of course that is an economic impact on our communities. So the fact that this is being worked on and led by the Environment Agency, who are the statutory organisation who who enforce these things, and the fact that it looks like we have Southern Water cooperating and moving with, is good, but the fact it's even got to this situation is again an indictment of the lack of investment, the lack of attention that's been given to water, to sea pollution by our water companies over a very, very long period of time. And we know, and I know in particular, having been on Langston Harbour Board for 9 years before 2021, that the cooperation of Southern Water had often been lip service. So to have this as something that is a galvanising tactic to actually, or it's not a tactic, but a galvanising situation to get them to actually be making some differences, to be working hard, to investing time and money into this issue is well overdue. And my hope is that it doesn't stop with South Sea seafronts. That if these things like this continue to happen, this will crop up again and again in areas that affect Portsmouth, whether that be in Portsmouth Harbour, Langston Harbour, or elsewhere on our seafronts. So this report is very thorough. It's very telling. It really gives us an idea of what happens when things are not invested in and get out of control. And also, it's a warning sign that it can have impacts on us as human beings in terms of swimming and in terms of bathing and using our beach, which of course is a really bad thing if we're not able to do that, if things aren't tackled. But it's also about our wider environment as well, not just our environment for our biodiversity, etc., but also our environment for our economic environment in terms of our fisheries and all our economy that depends on the maritime, a good maritime environment for the future of the city.
Thank you, Councillor Winnerton. I'll go back to Councillor Hunt and Councillor Horton.
Yeah,
And then Councillor
I had a question for that. Very briefly, many thanks to Sarah Shreve and South Sea Stop the Sewage, and to Surfers Against Sewage, and to Gerald before, and to Steve subsequently, and everybody else in the council and elsewhere, right across the chief executive, everybody who's been putting pressure on Southern Water, and a whole bunch of other people. And thanks to the peer for them stepping up and trying to resolve the issue in partnership with us, which is how we do things in this council. We do it in partnership. We don't go out on a wing and a prayer. We try and make things happen. We try and make things sustainable for the good of the people that live here and who come and visit here. My one great sadness about this, and I am going to point it out, is that the government only intend that there will be no storm overflows permitted outside of unusually heavy rainfall by 2050. So I will be dead before that happens.
Well, that's cheerful. Councillor Horton.
I don't know whether this is worrying. I was on the same wavelength as Councillor Hunt. No, I just was really conscious that we've had a big...
Right to the end?
Not right to the end. We'd had a long debate, and actually it was at risk of politicians thinking that they were the only people in this conversation, and there've been some really, really great groups who've been working in partnership with throughout this, and I'm sure, Leader, you would not want to be given 100% credit for the signs that are on the seafront, because we actually did a really good piece of work in partnership with, as we know, Stop the Sewage South Sea on that. So that's what I was about to say, but Lee stole my words on his second time of talking.
I certainly wouldn't, Councillor Horton. It's just that the queue of people before I have an opportunity to do so is considerably long. Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, I'm on the same thread as Councillor Horton and Lee. I just want to say thank you very much for the report. Please do pass on to Richard. The report is really robust, and he's been very good and very patient with me, like Steve. He's been briefing me constantly, answering the many questions I've had, and has come back with, once again, very robust and detailed answers, which is really appreciated, because this is a really emotive subject, not just for us in the council, but for our residents as well. As it's been mentioned here already, you know, we are a waterfront city, so obviously we want the environment of our sea to be fantastic, but also we rely on that for our economy and our tourism as well. We have great events happening in the Solent, you know, and we've managed to get those here. I don't want to see those disappearing because they bring revenue into the city. Also, you know, we have a lot of people who rely their jobs, you know, as Matt's mentioned, you know, in the fishing industry as well. And we've seen the damage that some of this has caused caused already with the oysters and the shrimps and the population, not just in the sea, but sort of on the seashore as well. It is disappointing that the 2050 target is there, because we really need to, well, I know that it's faced backlash, the 2050 target from many campaigning groups, and I believe a campaign group has been granted permission to carry out a judicial review about it as well. So it's a really passionate subject. I'm really pleased, though, that even though me and Southern Water don't necessarily get on well, and as Councillor Heaney knows, been trying to get to sit around the table with them, and now we have new councillors in. I will reach out to all the new councillors to see if we can submit some questions and all sit around, because in fact it's not just me, not just Councillor Pitt or the Cabinet. All 42 of us should be able to sit around a table and ask questions for our residents, because it affects all of us across the city. So although I'm pleased that seems to be a positive relationship going forward at the moment, I really hope that continues, and as has been mentioned, it's not just lip service, because even though we're working alongside the Environmental Agency as well as bordering councils as well, and it's the Environmental Agency who have to deal with this, we're stepping forward alongside those other councils to work together, because we all know it's an issue. We know our residents care about it, and I think it's a real good thing. So as long as that relationship continues, and it continues to be a positive relationship, I think that'll be the best way forward. But I will hope and have all my fingers and toes crossed that it does continue that way, and it's not just lip service.
No one else indicating to speak, so just in summary from me, thank you to everyone that's participated in the process to date around the issues with South East in particular, the ongoing work around the notification boards, which for clarity will hold the information that Beach Boy holds. We've been waiting for Southern Water to continue their process of updating the accuracy and reporting capabilities of Beach Boy, which has been ongoing, and we've been involved in discussions with them. Stop the Sewage South Sea have also been involved in all of those discussions, and we're all very clear that the information displayed on the terminals must be agreed by all parties before it is actually put up there. So this will be a collaborative process, and it's important that everybody is part of that and feels that the process itself is valid and not just ticking a box. So thank you very much indeed. Are we happy to take the report and its recommendations? Thank you very much indeed. And Steve, thank you very much for coming along today. Good to see you. Item 7 on the agenda, the approval of the corporate plan. Kelly Nash.
Thank you, Chair. So this report comes to Cabinet every year, capturing the priorities for the organisation for the coming period. The plan that you've got before you for 23-24 is very much an evolution of the plan from last year, and I think that reflects that many of the themes in there are quite enduring, and actually a number of the initiatives to achieve them spread over a period of time. So there's not radical change or difference to this plan, and I think a lot of it will be very familiar to people. This version also probably reflects more the business as usual of the authority, which is obviously what a lot of people rely on in their everyday lives, as well as those large transformation projects. The plan aligns with the city vision that was put in place with partners and agreed in 2021, has that longer term focus. The recommendation is for adoption of the plan, subject to any questions or queries you might have this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Members, Councillor Horton, please.
I haven't got a question, Kelly, but I want to say thank you very much for the report. I think there's good reason that it's built on last year's, which was one that was built on coming out of the pandemic, and I think it's a good report and it's a good plan. I do want to pick up and you used the phrase business as usual. In the report, it's also referred to as services that people value, and I just want to highlight something there, because I think we need to really acknowledge the enormous hard work that goes into keeping things as business as usual, or services that we value, because it's not doing the same thing each year. It's working harder in the context that we're at, with increased demand, with increased prices, with increased pressures, with other things changing, to maintain a level of expectation that people quite rightly value in this city takes an enormous amount of work. actually in this city, we also go beyond that and do loads of other things. But sometimes those things don't get the attention that other things do. The new, the shiny, the different often takes that away. And I just want us just in this meeting to acknowledge and thank all the officers in the council, but particularly those that maybe sometimes don't feel very seen, because they are seen, because we do really value them and what they provide, and under no illusion that how tough things are now to keep those high standards.
Thank you, Susie, and colleagues will put that in for official noting, please, into the minutes from today. Gerald?
Okay, can I propose the report?
You can. Members, any other comments? No. Okay, report is duly proposed. All in agreement? Thank you very much, Kelly. Number 8, ratification update of the waste collection policy, and Colette Hill and Rebecca are both here.
So this report is asking Cabinet to approve a number of changes to the waste collection policy. These are to reflect recent changes to waste collection services, including food waste, battery collection and carton and plastic recycling banks. They're services we now have in the city. To approve the introduction of a charge for removal of contaminated recycling where there are repeated instances. Changes to the policy for properties with limited or no usable frontage to store bins on non-collection days, so no longer supplying large bins, and also streamlining the bin removal process for refuse containers and offering a wider range of alternative recycling containers. And also changing the waste presentation time throughout the city, which is currently 7 a.m. and changing it to 6 a.m. It's worth noting that whilst there are effective dates in the policy of the 1st of September, there will be an education, door knocking, comms piece going on from late August through till October, so there'll be no enforcement of those parts of the policy until we've completed that. And all changes will still include an educational step where there's engagement with our residents to educate them on what they need to do. The other recommendations that we're asking for are that Cabinet delegate further changes needed to the waste collection policy relating to our in-house service, which starts on the 1st of April 2024, to the Director of Housing, Neighbourhoods and Building Services in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Environmental Services, and that Cabinet note that there will be further updates required to this waste collection policy once the Government or DEFRA, or through DEFRA, have clarified the EPR DRS processes and when they'll be introduced. That's it, really.
Thanks very much, Colette. And although they are flagged as changes, some of them are, from what I understand, more about confirmation of process and about actually defining what the process is rather than leaving it open-ended, and that the indicated charge for removing contaminated waste is within the control of the resident, who may decide to deal with it in another way, such as taking 4 or 5 items out of their recycling bin and putting them into their black bin the following week and then representing their recycling bin. So we're not forcing charges on anyone, but we are giving them an option which we are no longer able to provide indefinitely for free if they fail to do with a contamination issue. Is that fair?
That's correct, and that would be for repeat instances only. So there'll be one educational visit where we'll still do what we do now, but we have got instances where we're going 5, 6, 7 times. So.
Cool. Second question from me, can you confirm that the existing policy, before we adopt the new policy today, makes it very clear to anyone in a flat-fronted property that they are not allowed to store their black bin on the street, and this isn't a change to that policy, but it is an action based on that policy?
Correct. So it's already on our website, in our policy, and if you order a bin off our website, then it also reminds you of that when you place the order.
And we're also offering alternative receptacles for those that are struggling with larger recycling bins in particular, to get them in and out of the property. and that we won't be issuing new black bins to flat-fronted properties unless there is a clear understanding that they will take those through the property and not leave them on the street.
That's correct.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? Dave, as Cabinet Member.
Yeah, not so questions, Leader, because the ones that you've asked there, I think, help show that this is not so much a change in policy, but an update of it as it's evolving, around the city to help people, and also to get that, as you say, Colette, the education-based approach where we can let people know things and let people know that there's help there to assist them. So really, it's just a kind of a tweaking of our existing bin policies that matches the reality of things. We do not, when I'm door knocking and speaking to people sometimes don't realise that, as a council we have to pay for our rubbish, our waste to be taken away, but with recycling we can get some income on that can go through to, funding other services. So it's important that we get this right, and I think that the policy, as it's brought out, that to try and in the report it calls it contaminated recycling, but that just means recycling that's got things in it we can't process. But that's always been the policy on this one. I think it's brought out more on as to be more fair to residents and to be more helpful to residents on this one. Like if the example of, if someone walks past after a night out and throws half a kebab in your recycling bin, that's not your fault. That's reflected in there as well, that we can come out, or officers can come out and help deal with that, and chalk it up to not the resident's fault. So I think that's fairer. I think that's a good thing to have it in the report. And the other thing is, one of the big issues, surprisingly, but it is a big issue, especially when I'm door knocking in Fratton, with Councillor Stuart Brown, so many people, as well as parking, obviously, but it's like the people are saying they don't like the amount of bins that are being left outside the flat-fronted houses that open onto the pavement. They're saying, it creates obstacles on the highway, and the more houses that leave it out, other people say, we can leave them out, and it becomes something that's become a bit of a, an obstacle there for people with mobility issues, for example, or dog walkers, or people, parents who have got buggies trying to get through the street, especially as the bins can then be blown all over and the street. So it becomes more of an obstacle course to these people. So I think this approach of, as you say, educating people, making people aware of why these rules are in there, why they need to come in, I think that's only fair. I think it will make more people realise, I didn't realise it was causing that much of a problem. But we've also put in there, again, going back to we want to help people and understand residents, is some people can't take their bins in, maybe because of a disability they've got or a health issue they've got. This policy, as the report has mentioned that in the policy, that we will be able to do that on a case-by-case basis when people come to us, that we will accommodate that, and we won't be expecting them to, but obviously that's not everyone that leaves it out on the street. So I think this one it's a very good evolution of our policy to match the realities, and I think it's also one that helps people more and addresses concerns that people have had. So thank you.
Could I just ask a quick, did you say you found someone who's thrown half a kebab away? Disgraceful behaviour. Colette, did you want to come back on that? So?
No, I think not about the kebab. No.
You haven't found people who've thrown half a kebab.
People throw everything away. I think you're right. We can make reasonable adjustments where it's appropriate, within reason. It won't be everywhere, and we'll make sure that we manage that. This will just help the teams who get the calls about all the bins on the streets manage it more efficiently.
Great, thanks. Anyone? Lee?
Very briefly, look, I'm impressed by the way people want to recycle. Really impressed, and our city wants to do it. So, but we have to help them to understand what it is that they can recycle. This is always a problem around the green bin. And as I go around, I knock on doors, so I do look in people's green bins, and there still is a lack of understanding, a lack of comprehension. I don't know whether that's communications or laziness or whatever, but people, they want to recycle everything in the house. They think that we can. But there still is an understanding that we can't recycle absolutely everything. So that takes me on to the next step. You know, I always hated throwing away the plastic trays and clear ones, and I've got the room to save mine, and I take black bags along. I take the black bag home and use that for my bin liner. But when I put the plastic bag, the clear trays into the bins, because you have to generally lift them up looking, I'm impressed by just how much clean plastic is there, because a lot of people clearly want to recycle. And so it's really impressive the way people respond, the way residents respond. But and it's always, so when I get through social media, people moaning that, you know, we haven't taken the green bin away. But when you actually look into it, it's contaminated is the word. It's not really contaminated, but there's things in there that we can't take away. So we've really got to redouble our efforts to get that message across, because we need to push up our rates, because we're only middle of that skip higher survey thing over the last couple of days, and we need to do better even than that. So, but I would say congratulations to everybody who's trying so hard to help everybody else recycle.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. I'm going to go to Councillor Barrett, and then I'm going to ask Cabinet to come to a conclusion on this one.
Thank you, Leader. I just want to say thank you very much. Really robust report again. I was very lucky enough to oversee this portfolio last year, and just to agree with what colleagues have said. Apart from poo and parking, one of the biggest things people came to me about was that people would constantly leave their bins on the highway, and of course that comes with all sorts of problems. They tip over, spill over, someone's got to go clean it up. Blocks the highway, so people with pushchairs, mobility issues cannot get through, people who are blind, tripping over things, something that we just don't want. So I think it's really good that, you know, we're pushing forward with these policies and making them really clear as well for our residents to be able to understand them. Because, I mean, as it says in the report, it costs, especially with contamination, it costs us as a council money, you know, and that's money that could be spent elsewhere if there was less contamination. And obviously, as a council, you know, we want to be as environmentally friendly as possible, recycle as much, be as green as possible. So the more that residents buy into recycling and doing as much as they can, it helps us as a council in many different ways, and it helps them as well. I wanted to make, I think it was 4.1.5 of the report. It's a reason why that we are pushing forward with these policies. It says that there were 1,778 incidences over the last few years for us to come out and empty recycling that, you know, was contaminated. We have some amazing officers with our community wardens and our waste officers. There aren't many of them, but when you look that 288 of properties have multiple requests ranging from 2 to 26 visits, can you imagine if all our officers' time is going out to speak to perhaps, even if it was a quarter of those, that number, up to 26 times, that's something that our officers could be out doing something else. So education is always key. It's something that I love. I've gone out and knocked doors with Councillor Horton and Councillor Atwell and Councillor Ashmore in regards to education and recycling. I look forward to doing it again this year. And most people do what, you know, they realise they've made a mistake and they make a change, and we don't have to see them again. But it's that handful that take up as everything else in the world, it's always the few that ruin it, and having to go out maybe to see someone 26 times, having a policy like this put in place means that we won't have to do that, and people will actually have to take ownership of what they're doing wrong, and we can provide that education first. You know, we're not horrible people, we're not gonna, you know, turn up at their door and slam them with a fine or remove their bins straight away. It's education first and foremost. If that doesn't work, then we move forward with other things. But I think it's just, you know, going forward, making things simple, clear, which is what we've been doing anyway, making sure that highways are clear and we're recycling as much as possible. Because let's be brutally honest, as a council, I know people complain, this administration, we've done exceptionally well with our recycling. Not only do we have the Tetra banks across the city, textile recycling, we have the battery recycling, food waste recycling, mixed plastic banks, you know, normal recycling. We've got the Green Waste Club as well. You can recycle literally anything in the city, and when it hits in a couple of years' time, where you could do the twin streaming, where you'll be able to do everything from home, then that's fantastic. But we've got that all in here in the meanwhile. And, you know, we're doing much better than a number of other councils in the area. We're very forward thinking, and I think we should be really proud of that as an administration. So well done to the officers and everyone who's been involved.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barrett. Members, are we happy to accept the reports and its 4 recommendations? Thank you very much indeed, both of you. Item 9, mandatory licensing of houses in multiple occupation. Claire.
Thank you. So Cabinet made a decision on the 22nd of November 2022 to introduce additional licensing of HMOs in Portsmouth. This decision included agreement to a new approach to licensing properties. The Council's current mandatory HMO licensing scheme operates a traditional approach to licensing, whereby licenses are typically granted on a 5-year basis with some exceptions. In making the decision to designate a citywide additional licensing scheme, Cabinet considered and agreed to a new approach for the additional licensing scheme, which was as a direct result of the responses to the statutory consultation. One of the main concerns raised by landlord respondents to that consultation was that good landlords would be penalised by the scheme, while bad landlords would not be differentiated. They expressed concern that the well-performing landlords would in effect be funding a scheme through licensing fees that would resource dealing with poorly performing landlords. In response to this, Cabinet agreed to adopt an alternative approach whereby poorer performing landlords would be kept under closer review with shorter licence terms. Licences will therefore be issued for a 1-year, 2.5-year or 5-year basis based upon the eligibility of the landlord for the additional licensing scheme. So through that November report, Cabinet also instructed officers to present a further report to Cabinet before September of this year with proposals to alter the approach to mandatory licensing to create consistency between the 2 schemes. It's therefore recommended through this latest report that Cabinet change the mandatory HMO licensing scheme to alter it to include the licensing model, fee structure and licence conditions to create consistency between mandatory and additional licensing. The other recommendation is that Cabinet instructs officers to carry out a non-statutory consultation with existing mandatory HMO licensing holders to be conducted from the 26th of July until the 16th of August this year on the proposals to create that consistency between the 2 schemes. Officers should then return to Cabinet in September of this year with the outcomes of this consultation to present the final proposals to Cabinet for approval.
Members, it's become increasingly clear to me over the last few weeks how important it is to make sure that we are using private sector licensing to properly regulate the HMOs that we have in our city and make sure that every resident has the right to somewhere decent to live in a decent sized space with decent communal facilities to access, and therefore this is about regulatory alignment between the additional licensing scheme, which will be for smaller HMOs, and the mandatory licensing scheme for HMOs which are larger and already licensed, to make sure there is regulatory alignment between the 2. And in doing so, we've discussed previously that we thought it was important that there should be a consultation period. That is what's before us today. Members, any comments, please? Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the issue of HMOs is something that comes up into my emails quite a lot. I think people will be pleased to know that we are regulating even better than before, proposing to anyway. If you're a good landlord, this is going to cost less than £1 per week per room. If you're a lousy landlord, it's going to cost you a lot more. So the obvious answer is to become a good landlord, not just for your tenants, but for all the people around you. It is absolutely the right thing to do, and I support it completely.
Thank you very much. Members, any other comments? Councillor Mays.
I think we have one problem, which is part of this, which is that there are some very bad landlords who are running HMOs who wouldn't bother to be licensed anyway. Do we have any powers to force them to be licensed or close?
Claire?
Yes, I think it's a really important point that you're raising, actually, that for any licensing scheme to be successful, we have to target our resources to actually ensuring that everybody is part of that scheme. The law does allow us to take action where someone is deliberately evading licensing, where there's either mandatory licensing or a designation for additional licensing. And that's absolutely our intention We actively do that anyway for mandatory licensing. Our team are constantly investigating potentially unlicensed HMOs, and we'll see a lot more of that activity once additional licensing is launched later this year as well. And the potential consequences for a landlord or agent of not seeking a licence when they should is that they could be fined potentially up to £30,000 per offence, or face prosecution, and we would undertake that activity in accordance with our enforcement policy.
Thank you very much, Claire. Members, any other questions? In which case, we're happy.
Can I just make a comment?
Chief Executive, you can.
Sorry, and apologies to Claire and Helen, because this arose from a conversation earlier today, so I've not had a chance to talk to them about it. But on pages 176 and 177, there's reference to the property's planning status. And at the moment, we're saying that it needs to have planning permission. I wonder whether between now and the 5th of September, we could just have a look at the phrasing of that, because it's not just the existence of a planning permission, but it's the compliance with any conditions that relate to that permission that could be relevant. And just picking up the reference that the leader made in introducing this, I think the direction of travel is such that we can less and less, I suspect, rely on planning policy in some of these areas. That there can be complications in using controls in one sphere to influence control in another, but if the officers could have a look at that, I think that would be well worth doing. Thank you.
David, thank you very much. Is that all right, Claire? Very helpful. Councillor Winnington.
Thanks. And I think it's in a similar vein. And thank you to the Chief Exec for bringing up the around sort of including that planning part into it. In my ward in particular, over the years, we've had quite a struggle in terms of some suspected HMOs that have never had any permission, and traditionally it had always been down, because they were smaller HMOs in particular, it had always been down to the planning side of things to do that investigation, and so I think that by having that, thinking about that wording wise, that would be really sensible, because then it would bring in that side of it in terms of the regulatory that we would be sort of mandating via this licensing scheme, which would then enable more of that investigation work into making sure that any HMOs in the city are licensed and regulated as they should be, because we do know that when there is poor housing of all types, as we all know, but HMOs can often be the ones where some of our most, the people who are least able to know of their rights and be able to do anything about it end up in those kind of properties. So I think that's effectively an added bonus of this, that in fact those HMOs that we currently do not have any knowledge of and are not officially designated as HMOs, this would give us an additional way to identify those and therefore make sure that they're properly regulated.
Thank you very much. And on that note, members, are we happy to accept the recommendations in the report? We are. Okay, thank you very much, Claire. I look forward to the feedback on the consultation. Next date for Cabinet is the 5th of September. thank you all very much for coming today. We'll see you soon.